I'm Dana Del Val, President and CEO of the Arts Partnership, and I could not be more thrilled than to say good morning and thank you for being here. Let's do a really Fargo thing. Let's give ourselves a round of applause for being here. What an amazing turnout. I was thinking, as I was looking at the list this morning, you're the choir. I know the great majority of you in here, you are arts supporters. Many of you are specifically Arts Partnership supporters. And so I'm thrilled that you're here. But I have a call for you to think about for the next two breakfasts and the state of the arts, which is look around the room and see who's not here, who should be here. We have a fabulous community, as you all know. It's growing, it's diverse, it's plentiful. But I don't think the arts are doing as well as they can or should be doing. And in large part, it's because our chorus is small. You're small but mighty. So I'm not criticizing you. I'm asking you to think about who are the people in your circles who need to hear about why the arts matter, both to the community as a whole and also particularly to the business sector. For the betterment, the growth, the economic stability, the ability to attract and retain employees, all of the pieces that we all hear about. I think this is a real solution element, and if people aren't in the room, it's going to be hard for them to understand it. So thank you for being here, and please consider that some friendly homework for April. I have to thank the Consensus Council, which is a statewide foundation that gave us a grant to do this work. Last year I got a grant from them to go and travel kind of anywhere I wanted to go, specifically to talk with arts and economics leaders. And I don't often think I'm magic, but somehow I made that money stretch farther than any human being has ever made $10,000 stretch. I went to Norway, I went to Washington, D.C., I went to Phoenix. Tanya and I drove through the upper Midwest. Ellen Schaefer and I drove through the mid-Midwest. We went all over the place. I think I went to 17 communities on $10,000. So it was really impressive. A lot of people did some very funny little, take my timeshare, stay in my apartment, come and we'll buy dinner, all those kinds of things. Mark Nesbitt, you definitely bought dinner for me in Norway, so thank you. But what I learned on that trip was that other communities are doing supporting the arts differently, not always better, but differently. And I was so struck by what I was learning, and I was particularly aware of how hard it was going to be for me to come back and talk to business people about it, because I'm not technically a business person. So I wrote to the Consensus Council after thanking them profusely for the first grant and asked them if they would consider this second level of investment so that you could be talked with, at, and to by peers. And they said, yes, we think that's a great idea. And I was so thrilled. And I am particularly thrilled to start this three-part series with David Brown, who actually was one of the last trips I took to Omaha. David will tell you many things about himself, so I'm not going to say much about him. But the minute I met David, I knew that he was running the kind of chamber that I had not encountered before. And that he understood that one facet of the Chamber of Commerce role is to think about the entrepreneur and the nonprofits. And David's particular interest is the arts. So it really aligned beautifully for me with my particular interests. And I was thrilled when he could fit this into his schedule and come and talk to you. So I need to thank the Consensus Council. I need to thank Flint, because when I talked with Jody Duncan about this breakfast series, she immediately said, well, let Flint come on and we'll help you manage your social media and all of the other media. So please join me in thanking Flint Communications. And then I would like to also thank Microsoft and Sandy Piatz, because when I wrote to Sandy, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and said, Sandy, would you consider moderating these conversations? I had barely taken my finger off of send, and the phone rang, and it was Sandy saying yes. So one of the things that David and I have talked about a little bit is you have to celebrate the small wins. Sandy, you're not a small win, but in that moment, I was thrilled. So thank you for being here, and thank you to Microsoft. That's all I'm going to say. You have some material on your table. I'm happy to talk about that with you if you would like, but this isn't about me. So I'm going to read Sandy's bio and introduce her and let the morning get going, because I imagine you have lots of questions that you want to know from David. Sandy Piatz is a director at Microsoft, serving as the site leader for Microsoft's campus in Fargo. Sandy started her career in technology at a startup software company in the late 90s for a partner of Great Plains Software in Fargo. From the startup, she went on to Microsoft, where she helped software vendor organizations partner with Microsoft. She then transitioned to doing global program management within support for Microsoft. In 2007, Sandy joined Eide Bailly LLP, a top 20 national CPA and consulting firm. She spent over 9 years at Eide Bailly in their technology consulting service practice. At Eide Bailly, she held leadership roles in technology sales, marketing, and customer success management, eventually achieving principal partner. In September of 2016, Sandy returned to Microsoft to serve as the director and site leader of Microsoft's Fargo campus. As the site leader for the Microsoft Fargo campus, Sandy and her team collaborate with Microsoft's businesses and leaders to lead the operations of the Microsoft Fargo campus, which includes working on initiatives to drive growth, engage with customers and partners on their digital transformation strategy, develop employee culture and morale, and recruit and retain talent. Sandy is on the board of directors for the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce, Ascensus, how do you say that, Sandy? Ascensus Trust, NDSU Technology Park, and UCode Girl. Sandy has an undergrad in education, a master's in business administration, and a master's in leadership. Please join me in welcoming Sandy Piatz.
Good morning. Back in 1987, a committee of Microsoft employees interested in collecting and displaying artwork created by artists from the community got together and formed a Microsoft art collection in Washington. Its mission was to create a positive work environment through the exhibition of international contemporary artwork. Today, over a quarter century later, this collection has mirrored the growth of our corporation. With nearly 5,000 artwork displays in over 130 buildings across North America, including our buildings here in Fargo, North Dakota. We've expanded that mission here in Fargo, and it's one of the reasons that I'm so honored to be here to serve in this partnership with these business leadership breakfasts. Art helps support our employee engagement initiatives. It helps support our recruitment efforts when we show the great work that art does locally. And it helps support retention efforts here locally. Whether it includes an art auction for our annual gift campaign, or if it includes the beauty of the art wall that we have in our commons featuring local artists, or if it includes local artists that are entertaining at our picnic in the summer. Okay. The arts is helping create an inspiring work environment, fostering innovation and creative excellence at Microsoft and Fargo. And it's important to our local community here. And so it is my honor to help host these leadership breakfasts, and it is also my great honor to introduce to you Mr. David Brown this morning. David Brown is president and CEO of Greater Omaha Chamber, one of the largest, most highly accredited chambers in the nation, and the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives 2015 Chamber of the Year. With a 5-star accreditation by the United States Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Omaha Chamber is in the top 1% of chambers nationally. Backed by more than 30 years of experience in economic development and chamber administration, David serves the chamber mission to champion a thriving business community and a prosperous region. With a bold vision, comprehensive understanding, and contagious enthusiasm. He, chamber staff, and volunteers work in earnest on behalf of more than 3,000 member businesses, encouraging their success by advocating for a strong business climate, creating opportunities for member visibility and business connections, pursuing investment and jobs for the region, strengthening leaders in the community, and enhancing the region's brand and image. Under David's steady leadership, the Greater Omaha Economic Development Partnership has successfully landed more than 800 projects, representing in excess of 39,500 jobs, and more than $10 billion in capital investment since 2004. David began his career in organizational leadership in Michigan in 1983 as president of the Monroe County Industrial Development Corp and director of Port Monroe. He served 10 years in Indiana at the Greater Fort Wayne Chamber of Commerce, first as vice president of economic development and then as president. His next assignment took him to South Carolina, where he was president and CEO of Greater Greenville Chamber of Commerce. David assumed his current role as president and CEO of Greater Omaha Chamber in October of 2003. David is a graduate of Dartmouth College with academic specialties in industrial location and environmental studies. There he played on the 1978 Ivy League Championship football team and was the recipient of the Earl P. Hamilton Award. He has completed courses at the National Development Council, the American Management Association, and Bell Leadership Academy and Gallup University. In addition to his professional responsibilities, David contributes his time and expertise to numerous community service organizations, including the arts. It is my pleasure to welcome David Grubb.
Good morning. So if you're from Omaha, you would know that when I get up and say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, I have a high expectation of a boisterous good morning, good afternoon, or good evening coming right back at me. So we'll try that again. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I appreciate that. I actually did that to my very first board meeting. Walked in and said, "Hi, board, how are you?" And they said, "Hey." So I walked off and came back and said, "Good morning, board, how are you?" And they looked at me like I was an odd duck. So I did it again, and finally they got the point. So now it has been going on for 15 years that when anybody on our board, our volunteers get up and say good morning, they get this boisterous good morning right back at you. So it has become infectious around our community. First, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. Dana, thank you for your hospitality and for your invitation here, and thanks to the Arts Partnership. Dana's visit to Omaha was pretty timely. We were going through an Omaha 2040 process at the time, and my mind was full of place stuff because place has become one of those important issues that's on our agenda. And so when we sat and talked, I had a whole bunch to say about the arts and the quality of life and all that kind of good stuff. And she caught me right at the right time because I was just spewing all this stuff from the studies and stuff that we had done. The good news is I think we put some of that into practice too, so we'll be happy to talk about some of that today. I'm assuming that not everybody here has been to Omaha, and so we're going to start with a couple of visuals just to give you an idea of just the arts part. So what you're going to see is literally just a montage of arts things that are going on in Omaha and some rankings that we've gotten recently. This is by no means complete. Matter of fact, I talked to my communications team yesterday and said we seriously didn't give public art its due in this video. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but at least it'll give you an idea of some of the excitement that we think is in Omaha. So just watch the screen.
See how I do this time. You'll notice I couldn't even turn the microphone on, so just speak well.
So there's some good music that goes along with it. worries.
Yes. All right, you're just gonna have to wonder about the music.
I don't even know what a speaker is, no big deal. Somehow he sneaks into every video that we do.
That's a good one, isn't it?
So I'll talk a little bit about that branding piece. We also have a couple of number 2 great American music cities that aren't LA, New York City, Nashville, or also Seattle. I love that ranking. They're great, but not they didn't include these other ones. Number 6 most vibrant arts community in 2018, and number 37 most fun city in America, and best art experience in Nebraska in 2018, and number 6 top 10 cities for starving artists. That means they don't starve. I put that up there only because, you know, we will use this on our website, the Chamber, and for all of our economic development tools. Because for us, place matters. So if you think, by the way, the format here today, I think I'm going to talk maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're going to have a conversation up here. You'll have a chance to answer questions. So bear with me here for a few seconds. So in 1993, the Chamber started doing economic development work, and we did a 5-year strategic plan that said, here's what we're going to do over the next 5 years. And every 5 years, we redid that strategic plan. And basically, I call it kind of building a layer cake. The strategy wasn't all that much different, but we wanted more. And so, as we wanted more, we raised more money to do that work. And then in 2017, we've been doing this now for a long time, 5-year plans. We realized that maybe we weren't actually hitting some of the goals that we needed to hit. Unemployment was really low, it had been for a long time. Business growth was good, but there were still pockets of the community that had unemployment. There were still pockets of poverty we wanted to hit. And we weren't seeing that all of our robust tools that we'll talk about here in a second are actually being used to promote the community. So we decided to do something very different. We hired Rebecca Ryan, who with Next Generation Consulting, who's a futurist out of Madison, Wisconsin. And we became the first chamber in the country to have a resident futurist. So she was in Omaha for the entire year of 2017. And she helped us build a 2040 vision. And then we used that 2040 vision to build our next 5-year plan. So think about what Omaha could be like in 2040, what we want it to be like. We actually call it the preferred future rather than the official future. And then we back plan from that to see what we have to do over the next 5 years to start taking steps towards accomplishing that future. So the economic development strategy and overall chamber strategy has changed dramatically. We'll talk a little bit about that during our conversation. One of the big component here, though, is that our strategy moved into 3 big components: people, place, and prosperity. And those 3 things in our market matter equally. We know that we can't attract and keep the people that we need if we don't have a great place for them to live. Because in our experience, the folks that we're interviewing, that our companies are interviewing, for the most part choose place before they choose where they want to work. And there's not a lot of lists that if you ask 100 college students from across the country to give me their top 10 cities where they want to live, I'll guarantee you none of them say Omaha. That doesn't mean that they won't end up in Omaha, but right now they don't realize it. So we've got to compete with places all around the country for not just economic development projects, but for people. And so place matters because we have to be a place that people want to stay and that people want to come to and work. So the work part is where we come in. The career piece is really important. We got to have a diverse mix of jobs for a whole host of different kinds of people. And we got to have a lot of companies that want to continue growing. And then the people part of this is really interesting because we frankly aren't growing our population fast enough to be able to make up, to have population growth sufficient to meet our company's labor needs. So we not only have to keep people from moving somehow or another, convince them to stay, but we also have to attract a higher number of people to come to our market. So the Chamber's strategy now looks far different than what it looked like before. In the past, I'd be measured on how much capital investments and jobs and the number of projects that we did. Now I'm measured on the number of tech jobs that we create and that we're able to provide talent for the market. How many people we have increased their skill sets. They go from part-time work to full-time work. What's our transportation system look like? And is it something that will attract people who want to live in an urban environment but see us having to have cars to get around our community? That's not a comparison to an urban core they might want to live in Denver or Chicago or Seattle. We have to create an urban core so we have a place where people who want to live in a big city can choose Omaha because we have something very similar to it. That means we have to change our transportation system in the market. We have to change our offerings from a park perspective and an arts perspective and culture perspective. People want music, they want art, they want active places that they can recreate. We don't have mountains, we don't have beaches, you know, so we don't have coasts, right? We don't coast. We also don't have all the challenges that go along with some of the coastal cities, but we also work really hard to maintain what we have. So we'll talk a bit more about what this 2040 strategy is all about. You know, Omaha has a real interesting history. We are blessed with business leaders who chose not just to build their businesses there, but to raise their families there and to invest their hard-earned dollars into the community. I went through what I consider a harrowing interview process to get the job in Omaha. Lasted about 4 months, and I got in front of dozens and dozens and dozens of business people. And there was one similarity that came across every single one of those business leaders that I talked to. I asked them why they do what they do. Why do they spend time in the community? Why do they keep investing their dollars to grow their businesses in Omaha? And 201, they all said the same thing. Because I want this to be a better place for my kids and grandkids. Every single one of them. So I asked the obvious question, well, what about tourism? Isn't this about creating spaces that tourists can come and spend money? We want our members to have a lot of sales every year. Is that something that you were thinking about? He said, you know, not really. If it happens that tourists like the stuff that we have, that's great. But we figure if our residents like it and our kids and grandkids like it, other people will come from the outside to see it as well. So you start thinking about that level of commitment, that they're spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars to make our community better and stronger, and they're doing it basically because they want to make sure the kids and grandkids have a place to stay and work. That's pretty cool, and it told me an awful lot about the spirit that these folks have. Now, we've been blessed again with entrepreneurs who started businesses and grown those businesses. We have 20 companies that started up in Omaha sometime in our history that are now worth more than $1 billion a year. If I could get one unicorn a decade, we're pretty happy campers. So we have to build a strategy that enables us to do that. So it changed our whole outlook about thinking how much of our economic growth has to be from existing companies growing versus startups and versus attraction from the outside. But the things that people are investing in around Omaha continue to amaze me. So we are blessed with Warren Buffett living in our community. We use his image every chance we possibly get. But probably the biggest impact that Warren has had on our community is the number of people that invested with him early on and who have stayed in Omaha. You know, there's a couple of hundred Berkeys, as we call them, that are worth a lot of money, who still live in their middle-class neighborhood, still drive a 5-year-old car, kids still go to public schools, and then there's a story every year in the paper about some family whose finally mother and father have both passed away. They're sitting there with the attorney and they realize that mom and dad are worth a couple $100 million, but they just haven't done anything with it. They just continue to invest. And now they're saying, now what do we do? Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't happen to everybody. I wish it happened to me, but it hasn't. But the fact is that those people are putting money back into Omaha. And the companies that have grown up there, the Kiewits of the world, the Mutual of Omahas of the world, the World Herald, which is our newspaper in the community, and dozens of other companies, those founders stayed there and started investing back in the community. And they invested in things like art museums and parks and performing arts centers and amenities that people can actually see the kind of culture and the kind of quality of life that they want to see in a community. So it is a surprise when we don't have a big announcement every year of some major new investment. This year we announced a $300 million riverfront redevelopment project. $250 million of it is philanthropy, $50 million of it from the city. Think about that, $250 million of it is philanthropy. That's a remarkable statement about these folks who are putting dollars into the community. Nothing happens in Omaha without a high level of philanthropy. We have 4 or 5 foundations that have evolved from these corporations who, Peter Kiewit's a good example. Peter Kiewit's Sons is a major construction company in the world, a Fortune 500 company. When Peter Kiewit passed away in 1979, he left all of his money to the Peter Kiewit Foundation. And that foundation still exists, and that foundation still puts money into these major projects in the community. And so now we have probably 5 of those kind of foundations that are all worth $600 to $800 million probably in corpus. And so that means they're giving 5% of that away a year. And so they're giving it to things that will help grow the community, help improve education, help improve the arts, help improve the quality of life. It's a real different process though. So if you think about it, let's say you're a local wealthy individual. If I call you on the phone and know I've got a project that you're really interested in, within a week or so, you can give me a yes or no if you want to move forward on the project. Now we're having to get used to how do you do that through foundations. Because foundations have a process that you have to go through, and there's a board that has to decide. And so things take longer going through the foundation process, but nonetheless, they're still there to support the community in some way. And so we're having to learn how to live in the foundation world as opposed to living in the individual who you can just go to that can make projects happen. Nonetheless, they're investing in things that make us a better place. So a good bit of that is the arts. A decision was made back in the early 80s that major arts facilities were only going to be built downtown. Because they wanted to make sure our downtown was successful. And if people were going to go to a Broadway show, or the opera, or the symphony, or go see any of the top 40 acts that come through town in our convention center and arena, we wanted them to have to come to downtown. And that has made our downtown much more thriving place. But all of those facilities had to be built. And they had to be built in a combination of public-private partnership in some way or another. The arts, as you'll hear here in a little while, have become a major part of that. I have to admit a little bit, I'm the chairman of the Opera Omaha board. I am there exclusively, well, originally I was there exclusively because my son Elijah is an aspiring opera singer. And just got a full ride for a master's program at the University of Alabama, so he's a pretty happy camper today. So is Dad, because he got a full ride. But I didn't know anything about opera. I had visions of opera, you know, the woman with horns on her head bellowing out this great song, or the stuff we saw in Looney Tunes, right, when you're kids, all those great tunes that we heard when we were watching cartoons. But have learned about the arts community from the inside out now, and now I chair the board. And we have an amazing opera that I think is making huge strides in our community. And you can add that to a ballet and a symphony and all the other things that go on to make the arts community really important in our market. You know, maybe the last thing I'll talk about, and then we can get into Q&A, is that a lot of our successes really is about friends working with friends. It's the relationships that you all have in this room. It's the relationships that many of you have with other people in the community, trusting each other enough to make investments in your community and doing it together, and then figuring out a way to move on to the next project. I will tell you that absent those informal friendships that happened in our community, even as late as the 1800s, when a lot of these families maybe came to Omaha or started businesses there, the friendships that have lasted over the centuries have made a big difference. And the friendships that we have today are centered in our ability to make things happen. So the relationships that you create make a huge difference. And then the last part of it, of course, and we'll get into this a little more aggressively, is the young professionals and how we engage them in our community. Several years ago, in 2003 actually, a group of about a half a dozen young professionals who were employees of chamber companies came to us and said, we think that the chamber is missing out on all this energy, all these folks whose future is going to be here in this market, but there's no mechanism for us to engage. And so we created a Young Professionals Council back then. Now we have 7,000 young professionals in our Young Professional Group. Last week we had our 10th annual Young Professional Summit with 1,500 young professionals spending the entire day learning about leadership and engagement, and it covered everything from nonprofits to the arts to lots of fun stuff. So in the end though, our young professionals now serve on every board in town. We aggressively make sure they're involved in every task force and commission that we put together, at the city or the state put together. And now one of the first questions ever asked when we're doing a major strategic initiative in Omaha is I'll get a phone call and say, what do the young professionals think about this? I mean, they've become a major force politically, they've become a major force in getting things done. We built a new baseball stadium for the College World Series back about 10, 15 years ago. And the young professionals wanted to see retail at street level. And so I said, well, go to the hearing and tell them what you want, and let's see what happens. And they went, and the response was, well, it's going to cost about $850,000 more than we have available, so we can't do it. They came back to me happy that they participated, but a bit disconcerted that was the answer they got. Today, they would go out and raise $1 million and give them a check. The difference between then and now is remarkable. They have become a force in our community, and for every arts organization in town and for every business organization in town, young professionals are the target for us, not just because we want them engaged, but because we want them engaged because they will stay if they are engaged. How do we keep our young professionals involved in the community so much that they won't go anywhere else, and even more importantly, they'll become advocates for us, to other people who might be moving to town or who might be thinking about leaving town. So I've thrown a lot out at you. Maybe we can kind of get to more details and the questions and answers, okay? All right, here we go.
Well, thank you very much, David, for being here and sharing all of your great insights with us here this morning. First question I'm going to start off with is, can you talk about a little bit more about how the arts have been such an important catalyst to, and you shared a little bit already this morning, but such an important catalyst to the Greater Omaha Chamber's vision, and ensures that the Greater Omaha is a vibrant place to do business, work, and live. So how are they factored into Prosper Omaha 2.0 campaign?
Thank you. So the Chamber has, of course, a mission statement that we talked about earlier, being a champion for a growing regional economy. But our vision is to be a catalyst organization to ensure that Greater Omaha is a vibrant place to live, work, and have a business. And two key words in that, catalyst number one and vibrant number two. Catalyst warns everybody right up front, we're going to cause change to happen. We're not going to wait for it to come. We can handle it when it does come and we're not paying attention, but we want to be the ones that cause change to happen. I don't know about you, but I'd rather cause change than receive change. I'd rather be the person moving the cheese than having my cheese moved, right? So we think the same way about the community. So how can we think ahead of the next curve and try and figure out those things that we need to cause disruption to happen, or even, sometimes even more importantly, identify that disruption up front so that we're not having to respond in a real negative or maybe even a short-term way. So for us, that means that every one of my staff wakes up every day knowing that I expect them to change something. Now, it may just be the way they tackle a problem. It might be the way they deal with a volunteer, but we're constantly thinking about how do we engage this community in change. So when we developed the Omaha 2040 strategy, we realized that the entire strategy was about change. I mean, there was nothing that was in Omaha today that would not be different in 2040. One really good example, right now Omaha is about 25% non-white in our region. By 2040, we'll be 52% non-white. So we'll be a majority non-white community by 2040. And so we looked at that and said, are we ready for that? And the answer unequivocally was no. That we would look in a room like this, we look around and say, there's a lot of gender diversity in here, but there's not a lot of race diversity in here. Our market's going to be predominantly diverse. And so how do we help companies do that? How do we help companies be a more diverse employer and create an inclusive culture? And then how do we have the community do the same thing? The community will be diverse whether we like it or not. But that doesn't mean we have to be inclusive, but we should want to be. And so we're engaged now in inclusivity issues. The place scenario as far as 2040, we found ourselves in the same situation. And you all know that Chambers of Commerce have zero authority to do anything. Our members give us money and tell us to go spend it and accomplish these goals. A lot of times that means that we're asking people who do have authority to do stuff that they may not want to do. And so that's where the advocacy work comes into play. So all of a sudden we find ourselves with this place strategy saying, we want our parks to be better. We want our transportation system to be more vibrant. We want to be known as a more innovative, engaging, inclusive community. How in the world does the Chamber of Commerce do that? And so we do that by creating a whole lot of more partnerships and encouraging people to do the kinds of things we want them to do. So now my measurement, I am measured now on whether or not the community changes. Do we actually have an urban core strategy that will see $1 billion in investment in the urban core over the next 5 years? That's where the Prosper 2.0 strategy comes in. So we took this 2040 vision and built a 5-year strategy, which we call Prosper 2.0. And it tells me what specifically we have to get done as an organization in the next 5 years. And so the place strategy in particular is important. And one of those place strategies is how do we continue to support the arts? So for us, the arts now have a series of spots on my board of directors. I have a relatively large board, it's about 100 people. But we have 6 people that are dedicated to the arts on my board. We have visual artists, we have performing artists, we have associations of artists, we have philanthropists who are supportive of the arts that serve on our board of directors. So when we're having strategy discussions, we make sure the arts have a voice in what's going on. Most of our board members in some way or another support the arts, either financially or by having somebody on their team or themselves serving on arts boards. And part of our challenge is to make sure that the arts community continues to be robust, because I have people in the community who expect the arts to be there, because that's the kind of quality of life that they expect. So we're constantly involved in trying to figure out how do all these nice arrows that we have in the quiver, how do we have more arrows? And how do these programs that we have in place, how can the business community support them?
I'm going to click down on something real quick with you, because it's something that you shared both in your talk and also just recently about giving different groups a voice. Whether it's the young professionals group or the arts, or you've also talked a little bit about diversity. Was that part of your core strategy, or is that just a leadership style that you shared? Talk a little bit more about the importance of giving the arts voice, giving young professionals voice, bringing in that diversity, whether it's racial and ethnic minorities, in order to make sure that you're leading appropriately for the chamber.
That's a great question. So my tagline really is we always accomplish more together. And so that's my initial bias is, who can I engage to make this process move forward? And many times I don't have any responsibility for moving some of these things forward, but there's always somebody that can move the agenda forward for us. So my first inclination is always to reach out to find somebody who's more knowledgeable, more experts, better at this particular business than we are. Our entire staff is built around collaboration, and so all of our team is trained about how to build input sessions, strategy sessions, collaboration processes. So we have 65 organizations outside of our community that we partner with on an annual basis. 60 committees within our organization that have more than 1,000 volunteers involved. So we always bring other people to the table. And it's a variety of people based on the issue, right? So the diversity issue has been intriguing because all the groups are involved in the diversity issue. If we're talking about creating a culture that's inclusive for all people, then we should have cultural amenities that reflect that diversity. So our largest population, as an example demographically, will be the Latino population. So we look at our Latino population and say, well, culturally, are we set up to accommodate that? Our Black population is not growing much, but frankly, it's been around a long time, and culturally, we are not well established in the types of cultural amenities that an African-American couple might find in Atlanta or Denver or Minneapolis, where there's a larger audience and therefore larger pool, so they can do different cultural activities. We have a problem because we have a relatively small population there. So we have to try and figure out ways to accommodate that. But we only know that if we're engaging that population and trying to figure out how we can be helpful there. So we're constantly trying to figure out who are the people out there that we need to be listening to, and how can they help us move the ball, and how can we be listening to what their challenges are.
And the arts have such a great tie to the culture of every heritage.
It really is. So, and I'm on the Omaha board, and I was talking earlier about some of the things that we are doing that celebrating our 60th anniversary, that we have tried to create a deconstructed festival called the One Festival. We have 50 different free events for the community. They give them all these individual segments of what it takes to put an opera on. It could be middle schoolers writing poetry and then having librettists write music and then performing that music in front of their families. It was, the stories that they wrote about in poetry were poignant, to say the least. And the music was, it brought tears to everybody's eyes. To have these middle schoolers hear their words, being performed. Or to take films of, and then show them in 360 degrees with local artists playing the music. Doing things with jazz, because Omaha has a great African-American jazz heritage, and somehow building jazz into the opera scene, so we're showing people how music relates back and forth. The arts community needs to be engaged in making their offerings diverse and robust. I can't do that. Just because I'm the chairman of the outreach board doesn't mean I had anything to do other than saying, yes, go do your great thing. But someone's got to lead those organizations to do things that will attract the kind of people that we want to attract and keep.
Yeah, and it sounds like you do such a great job of encouraging others to serve on boards in your leadership style as well.
We have, you have a leadership program here, I think the chamber runs, right? We've got a leadership in Omaha, it's been around 48 years. And we take 48 people every 9 months and we send them through the grinder. And they see everything you can possibly see about what's going on in the community, from the arts to education to healthcare to homelessness to anything you can think of. And the reason we do that is because we want those folks to start engaging in those issues. I need leaders to serve on those boards. So when I interview a good number of the candidates, say, look, are you willing to do something once you get done here? This isn't about putting this on your resume. If that's all it's about, we're not interested. Folks in our leadership program have to already be engaged in the community before we actually add them to our class. But maybe one of the more unique things we do, we have a program called the Omaha Executive Institute, which is designed to welcome new executives and their spouses to the community. And we do an abbreviated leadership program for them in the evenings. And the total reason we do it, because we want them to engage as quickly as they possibly can in some not-for-profit in some way or another. And so they get exposed to everything. And then when they're done, we give them an opportunity to sign up for whichever board they want to serve on. And 201, they all engage. And in most cases, their spouses, if they aren't already engaged, also engage. So we'll do probably 24 couples a year in that process. And so we'll end up with 48 brand new executive level volunteers serving on boards. It makes a huge difference when they get involved early. And we'd love to have them involved with the chamber. We got plenty of ways to keep them busy. But we might not be the thing that really drives them. And that might be about early childhood. And so good, here's a place you can put your interest in early childhood. Get them engaged early.
That's great. I'm going to ask you one more question and then we're going to go to the audience next. So you talked about the urban core. And we talked about the need to build, so to ask you a question about building vibrant downtowns, so providing access to cultural activities, creative opportunities, and investing in creative cultural places to attract and retain employees. What are businesses in Omaha or the greater Omaha business community as a whole doing to make that happen?
So how many of you have been to Omaha before? Wow, a whole bunch of you, that's great. Come on back, spend some more money. We love you. So if you've been to our downtown, it kind of feels like there's a downtown, right? There's tall buildings and there's a riverfront and all that kind of stuff. And you can kind of see the density that's there. But what we're seeing is that it's a linear downtown and it kind of goes until it gets to the next heavy development, which for us is Midtown, which is where Mutual of Omaha's headquarters is. And that's about a 5-mile stretch from the river to Midtown. And it's really difficult to say that's dense. It's the most dense place we have, but it really isn't comparable to what you might see in Denver, Minneapolis, or Detroit, or Chicago, where you actually have these tall buildings, no parking challenges. I mean, parking challenges because you don't have to drive a car. You can actually take mass transit somewhere if you want to. Pedestrian amenities, you can walk to stores and do all those kinds of things. So we've realized that if we're going to be successful making our downtown what we want it to be, we have to create that opportunity. So we've got this urban core committee that is designed to look at all the assets in that corridor and then figure out how we can make it more dense. And then what lessons can we learn that can be used in the towns around us? So we do a regional economic development, so 6 counties, and there's probably 32 communities in that 6-county area. Each one of those communities has a downtown that they want to see thrive. And so they're asking us, how can you help us build our downtowns too? And so we're learning a lot from our process of trying to figure out how to use property in its highest way possible, cause development to happen, but maintain kind of the culture that you still want in that market. For Omaha, it's easy. We've already put I shouldn't say it's easy, it's easier, because we've already put a lot of assets in the downtown area for the arts. Now we're having to expand that into neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods need to be taller and denser. A really interesting stat that shocked us, in this corridor that I talked about, is 42% of the land is in parking. 42%, so 5 miles out this way and about 4 blocks north and south, 42% is in parking. Now, we want to see $1 billion in development happen in that corridor over the next 5 years. It's not going to happen if those parking lots are still there. Those are, as far as I'm concerned, those are development sites. But if I'm taking parking away, I've got to give some alternative to moving people around. So we are now leading the effort on developing a transit strategy, which means the business community is going to stand up and say, yeah, here's how we're going to fund it. And we want to see it ground broken for it at the end of 5 years. We've got a rapidly approaching deadline. I know 5 years doesn't sound like it's rapidly, but in transportation, that's really, really, really fast. To build our core downtown, we want to see, that's probably going to be in 25% of the land will be in parking, and the rest will be developed. That means denser populations, different multiples of different opportunities for recruiting new kinds of businesses, primarily those that would service people that live and work in that space. And we can do the same thing now, we think, in the smaller towns. Every small town seems like they have some cultural amenity that's unique to them. And so we're going to be teaching them how to do the same thing and supporting them in their markets too. Downtowns, I think, are the soul of a community. If downtown's dying, you can see the rest of your community probably is too. Now, that's a personal bias, but after 37 years in this business, I've never seen a town that has a dying downtown that has a vibrant economy and a vibrant place that people want to live.
Our governor agrees with you with his Main Street initiative. And when you think about the parking, and then with everything you say yes to, you have to say no to something or find an alternative option, and it looks like that's something that you're working on there.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out who the first guinea pig is going to be. That first business that wants to locate downtown and the parking, the city says, no, we're not going to build a parking lot for you. That's going to be a brave soul who does that. But we know it's coming. It has to come, because the money that you don't use to build a parking lot, you can use to support mass transit. So if we can get it done quickly enough, we think that we can actually see lots more development happen. We think that you can actually do about $2.5 billion in investment rather than $1 billion if we have a transit system that's effective in that market. 2.5 times the investment. So that there is an economic reason to do it too, but for a lot of it, it's about keeping people. You know, our young professionals say they really want to have that choice. They want to have an urban choice. They want to have a near-in townhome, apartment, condo choice. They want to have a near-in neighborhood choice. They want to have suburban choices. They want to have exurban choices. And so we've got to be able to provide all those choices if we're going to be able to compete for the kind of talent that we need.
So, hey David, so you're talking about creating mass transit. When you talk about creating transit, so you don't have to have parking for those people, are you talking about a transit system that's centered in your downtown urban core area, or are you talking about something that's going to take them all over greater Omaha?
It's a greater Omaha transit strategy, because frankly, the pockets of poverty that we have are in northeast and southeast Nebraska, and in Council Bluffs. We also cover Council Bluffs and Iowa, so we've got a responsibility for economic development across the river too. And there's pockets of poverty in those places. At 2.5% unemployment, I don't have a lot of bodies available to work in jobs. A lot of those jobs are 10, 15, 20 miles outside of downtown. And I can't get people there from where they live. Our transit system right now basically is an occasional bus that they might be able to take in the morning to get to work, but if they gotta work second or third shift, they're not getting to work. So the first reason we did this was, I gotta move people more efficiently through this market, through our region. And frankly, that's a big piece of us taking 10,000 people over the next 5 years and taking them from underemployed to fully employed status. That means training, it means transportation, it means a whole host of different things, but I'm being measured on whether or not we can actually show that we've taken 10,000 part-time people and moved them into full-time status to fill the jobs we have available in our market. So if I'm being measured, you can bet my people are being measured on it. And so we're building a strategy that moves people around the region. When we do that, we realize that we have to do something different in the urban core. So a streetcar probably is going to be part of this process, but a streetcar that runs 25 miles into the hinterland doesn't make any sense. Bus rapid transit might, which is basically an articulated bus that runs with fewer stops and has control of traffic lights. So we're putting one of those in this year. Streetcar probably will start in 21. But we've got to have connections with the rest of the system so that everybody has the chance to move around if they choose, not by driving a car. So it's regional in scope with some focused areas that we know we need to have some different amenities if we're going to create the kind of dense population base we want to in certain spots. That help?
Yeah, there's going to be bus, all bus, and a little rail, or are you thinking more rail?
I think, well, streetcar will probably be a 5-mile jaunt from the Med Center to all the arts and cultural and entertainment districts in the downtown area and back. And then development will happen on either side of those much more densely than it would happen if the rails weren't put in the ground. Bus rapid transit is a bus system without rails, so that actually is intended to move people quickly in and out of town. So it doesn't help us much on retail sales or people living downtown, but it does get people to downtown for events. Our biggest trick is going to be the north-south connection. So I keep doing this. Omaha is an east-west community laid out in grid, and our north-south connections are very, very weak. So what we're going to see is an enhanced bus system that will tie in with bus rapid transit and with the streetcar and be connected north, south, east, and west. And then we'll keep adding more and more assets as we see population needs.